Aha, Ravi Suman. I'm Ravi Suman, and thank you for joining us today on the Sikh Channel episode, where we continue our series on health, affecting all health matters. Today, we are delighted to be joined by two of our guest speakers. So we have Mital Thanki, who's CEO and founder of the Spark Academy, which provides teaching for school children. Mital, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we're also joined by Sunil Naphray, who is executive life coach, NLP practitioner, and also an academic teacher. Sunil, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. A warm welcome and Sat Sri Akal and Namaste and Assalamu Alaikum to everybody.
Okay, great. So just before we talk about today's subject, which is specifically about mental health affecting school children, and it's become something topical. We've seen this week in the press that there's been a range of opinions about when schools should reopen again across the UK, when students should be going back into school. Now, when we were all at school, we were never in a situation where for almost 3 months plus, we weren't going back to school because of a global pandemic. So this is the first that we've seen in our lifetimes. And so naturally, when I was thinking about this and how it's affected children that we know, whether it's our nephews, our nieces, or any of your own children, one of my questions was that I had on my mind is schools have been closed now since March. So what else is that causing in terms of social isolation for children?
Sorry, do you mind if I start, Sunil? Sorry. For
Yeah.
me, there's loads of complex issues surrounding, mental health and isolation at the moment. And one of the key things that's happening is that children are not able to do a simple thing that we take for granted, which is to go out and play. And playing is really important. So for younger children, it might be play. For older children, it might be just hanging out and just having a conversation in the physical realm. And play is really important for cognitive development in children. So it not only helps them with social interaction, it helps with building a sense of morality, loads of things. So this is one of the things that are contributing to feeling lonely, to feeling isolated at the moment. And there's reasons for that, because actually children have underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes of the brain, and that part of the brain regulates your emotions, your feelings, and parents are now having to face a bit of a battle at home because the children at home being homeschooled, etc. Parents are having to try and fill in that void and that gap that the children are feeling and fill in their sort of emotional stresses, so to speak. So parents as well are finding it very difficult to cope with having the children at home and having to provide that emotional support, because normally parents would have some respite as well from giving all that emotional energy. The respite would be that children would go to school, for example, learn and pick up new skills. This is where teachers come in, where daycare centres come in, where external family members come in, such as grandparents, etc. So because parents aren't able to have that time away from their children emotionally, parents are sometimes also feeling drained and feeling that they can't provide that emotional support at home. So children might also feel like they're unable to open up as much, unable to get that support too. So at the moment, this whole feeling of isolation, parents are feeling isolated because they don't have that support network around them, but also children are feeling isolated because they're not with their peers. And this pandemic has really proven that, having that interaction with peers or people other than your immediate family is so important in development of children. So that's where I stand on that bit.
Okay. Interesting. Neil?
Yes, yeah. I just wanted to add really to Mital's points in terms of school, and schooling in general provides the child with a routine, and also the parents with a routine as well. And what's obviously happened with the fallout from the pandemic is that the routines have completely changed. And so, if, for example, there isn't a structure or routine which is a sufficient alternative to what they had in school, because obviously school would offer them the academic development, the social and sort of spiritual elements of schooling, so, and also the physical education side of things. So all those cornerstones are a part of a child's education, and encased within a routine. If that routine is gone, then obviously that obviously can present challenges, as my colleague Mital has just mentioned there, in terms of the peer group's been taken away. They haven't got any specific timelines to do lessons or learning, and so very much rests on the ability of the child and the parent to kind of look at routines and try to have something which resembles the schooling. And obviously there are different approaches to homeschooling, but one of the main things is that the structure's been taken away. But there lies an opportunity to actually look at one's routine and structure outside of schooling, because there's huge benefits of having a routine that works in every aspect of your life.
Okay, interesting. And so, with your collective experiences, when did you first come across school children having mental health problems?
I've lost count, to be honest. The amount of cases that I've seen is shocking. It started from when I first began teaching, 11 years ago. And I've noticed that it's significantly increased over the past sort of, I'd say, 5 years. One example was where I had a year six child who was due to sit their SATs exams. And I noticed a few signs. I felt that he was a little bit withdrawn from how he normally is. There was a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of rigor and passion for what he does. And I just took him outside of the class and I said, "Are you okay? You don't seem like your usual self," because I monitored it and I realized over a few weeks he was feeling that way. And this child, unfortunately, just broke down into tears, had an actual breakdown, and was really upset at the fact that these were his words. He felt that he wasn't good enough and that he wouldn't be able to pass his exams or meet the expectations of people around him. And that obviously broke my heart to have to hear a child who's 10 or 11 years old feel that way and feel worthless. And that is a sign, that feeling that feeling of guilt or that feeling of worthlessness is a major sign of anxiety or depression. And that's when I realized and I felt that things had to change in education. I saw a child as young as 10, but I've also seen a lot of children in year 12 and 13, those who are sitting their A-level exams, facing a lot of pressure, a lot of external social pressure, as well as, making really important life decisions. And that can fuel a lot of negative feelings and emotions. So there's a myriad of things that contribute to those feelings. But unfortunately, these feelings are there. And all educational establishments need to sort of look at how we can bring mental health into the picture and how it should be more integral to every lesson, as opposed to it being something that's just covered for a couple of weeks to raise awareness. So it needs to be integral to the way they conduct their lessons and the way they do things in the school.
Okay, Sunil.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I as well as being a transformational life coach and NLP practitioner, I've been in the education field for about 27 years, and I have to mirror what my colleague has said. The situation was very different when I graduated and I became a teacher 27 years ago in 1993, and I would say definitely last sort of particularly 5 to 10 years. there's more pronounced issues around the psychological and the emotional well-being of pupils. Now, whether you could say it's down to puberty or whether it's down to social media, or whether it's just pressure that maybe some of the children feel, is definitely absolutely there. So I would say, in terms of when I first experienced them, I would say, children the ages of 9 and 10, particularly around that secondary school transition stage, that can cause a lot of anxiety, stress, distress in many cases, lots of overwhelm. So when we're talking about mental health, they're talking, they just feel that they can't cope, or they just don't feel that they can speak to anybody about how they're feeling, the thoughts that are going on in their minds, etc. So, and particularly at that age, that they just don't have the cognitive capacity to be able to express themselves. And obviously, there are issues around when they get to that puberty stage, that that can also bring up lots of issues there. And but it is definitely pronounced. I mean, I work with lots of teachers. I do lots of training, and in my training of teachers of maths and English, we're having to embed awareness training in mental health and emotional well-being as part of our pedagogy. It's part of how we teach students, and to be aware and to bring ourselves to the kind of arena of understanding students, how they react, their emotional response to things, and being really sharp on picking up the signals and using our instincts, really, and trying to respond appropriately. But absolutely, it's something. And I think the pandemic itself, we don't know the full fallout of how the pandemic has, what real impact it's had on children while they've been at home, away from school. When they go back to school, how they're going to transition, how the teachers are going to react, which is why, I'm working with lots of teachers at the moment, and we are doing our best to get ready for every eventuality which can be brought on by one's mental health. It's definitely an issue. I totally agree with what Mital said. It needs to be firmly embedded into the curriculum and the teaching and the awareness and the student support, the pastoral support of students. It's absolutely critical. But we can all play our part in being aware. All of us can.
Yeah.
So, although we've seen over the years mental health now becoming a subject which is spoken about widely in the media across different ethnicities, but in terms of mental health in the context of children, whether these children are at school or they are not at school, for the viewers, what advice can you give in terms of knowing what symptoms to recognize when a child is facing mental health issues?
I'd say there's many, actually, to be fair. I mean, lack of sleep is one. Persistent change in mood, for example, is another one. And displaying signs of guilt is another one, which I mentioned before. Lack of enthusiasm. Another one is loss of appetite. So loss or excessive gain in appetite as well. Could be another type of symptom. But as a parent, I always feel that you tend to know your child, and you tend to know how they normally would be. So as soon as you sense a difference that's kind of lasted a bit too long, that's when that's your opportunity to sort of open up a conversation surrounding mental health. Sunil, I'm not sure, do you have any more?
Yeah, absolutely. In support of what you're saying, Mital, definitely. I mean, again, I'm a parent myself as well. My children are grown up, but I'm very aware of these issues. And I think, if you will know your instinct as a parent, that inner voice will tell you something is wrong. And one thing that parents must never do, at the expense of everything going on in one's life, is to ignore that inner voice, that gut feeling, or something that your heart is telling you, or in your soul, or coming from some other source power. You just need to really understand that. And if you know that you've noticed changes in your child concentrating, for example, also if they're overly using their social media at the expense of general normal communication, if they're not talking as much, if you notice anything to do with their non-verbal expressions, that they're expressing, they seem to be deep in thought, and you're not quite sure what the issue is. You may well find that with some children, they may start displaying some antisocial behavior. Now, that might be because of boredom. And boredom is very, one has to be very careful with boredom, because if you know your child's bored and they haven't got routine and structure, then that could lead to other problems like depression, for example. And we want to avoid that at any cost. So those are some of the things I probably would like to add to what Mital has already mentioned. But your gut instinct, and not to ignore that inner voice. That's a really strong inner voice, and to go with that, and then to go into other lines of questioning just to find out exactly what the issue is.
You mentioned social media there, and when we were children growing up, we were either out playing football or playing hopscotch or playing netball, and
I
I
remember the
love
day.
my BMX. Exactly, I love my BMX bike. I remember having puncher kits falling out of my pockets just
Yeah.
in case I punctured my tires. So now it's different. Now when you see kids growing up, they have an iPad or another tablet device in their hands, and I'm not against technology. However, the question I've got is, how can you draw that line when someone is being, I'm talking about a child here, is being excessive in the use of tablets to the extent that there could be a mental health problem? How do you, where do you draw that line? Where's that clear blue water?
I think it's very interesting that we're touching on this, because actually, when it comes to technology, social media, parents also are experiencing the same thing. Where parents would be actually, going on their social media rather than possibly having a conversation. Children are doing the same sort of thing. So in that sense, it can sometimes, from a child's perspective, can be seen as quite a hypocritical thing to do. So it's about leading by example, for example. So that would be an important element. I find that a lot of children are utilizing social media. It's the new way to connect. Unfortunately, sometimes it can also bring other issues, such as safeguarding and that sort of thing. But what I would recommend is that if you are spending time as a family, then you have a no phone zone, for example. Something very simple as, what, guys, we're going to be switching off our mobile phones whilst we're spending time together. I think that sets a really good precedence, and it's the same rule for everyone. So again, it's about managing the time that you are on social media. That's something that I try and do regularly every day. As soon as I reach a particular time, that's it. My phone is off. So that I'm able to just wind down, for example, and spend that key quality time with family.
Yes, basically, back to the question in terms of the fine line. I don't know whether you can quantify this, but if you know that your child is there's a rapid change in their eating patterns that's different from before, if they're spending excessive amount of time on social media, or other kind of modes of communication that may not really serve them very well. So if you notice that things are getting longer, or bigger, shorter, and things of that kind of ilk, that can actually be a giveaway as to whether it's kind of bordering into something to worry about. And again, there's no harm in actually just asking those gentle questions to children. Do you think you're spending a bit too long on there? What do you think on your PlayStation, etc.? And those are things are really, really important. And again, just in terms of supporting what Mital said, I think that having that, knowing when to have the conversation. When I put my coaching hat on, maybe people should just have a visual reminder of their timetable, maybe a little board in, some kind of a mini whiteboard in the house, and just show a timetable. If the children are able to use mobile phones, there's something like Google Calendar, where you're putting in, right, we're going to have family time from 6 till 7 before we have dinner. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about things. Because if it's in the diary, if you can see it, if it's a visual reminder, then you're going to do it. And that can also help with establishing routines in the home. And yes, sometimes you do have to book yourself time to have a meeting. I mean, I have meetings with myself just to make sure that I've got all my things done in place. and I have a little time in my Google Calendar. So something of a visual reminder, something that the children can get actively involved in planning, so they have ownership, they'll value it a lot more, it'll improve and increase their esteem as well, that they're leading in their own development and moving forward. And that will also help them to become independent. And then there's less pressure on the parents, always cajoling, guiding, and then the child is becoming more independent. They've got their own inner intrinsic motivation, self-willingness to do things themselves. That will also put the pressure off the parents, will increase the resilience and confidence of the child. But sometimes it's through these difficulties, as Einstein said, where there's difficulty, there's opportunity. So we should try and look at difficulty in a positive way and then see how we can step forward and move up.
Okay, so I know we're going to have another episode where we can explore this subject, specifically on school children, as well as children outside school life. So for our viewers, what simple, practical tips can you give, whether they are tactics or strategy, in helping them deal with mental health challenges that their children, or it could be their nephews or nieces, that unfortunately have?
I would say it's really important to normalize the conversation around mental health, just the same way as physical health is important, and you would possibly go see a GP or go to the hospital to address those needs. Likewise, mental health is equally as important. So normalizing that conversation around the dinner table, for example, is a great way, like Sunil said, just opening up and having that conversation. So something simple as, you don't seem your usual self today. Is everything okay? So the child knows that you've acknowledged that there could be something potentially wrong, and you're opening up that conversation for your child to have that conversation with you. And what I would also recommend is the tactics that we would use in teaching, which would be, make sure that you're at the same level as them in terms of your body language, in terms of the height difference, etc. So sit next to them and have a conversation and show that you're listening to them. So, showing that you're listening to them will mean that hopefully they're more likely to actually open up to you. So focus in on them, give them that time, try not to do anything else whilst you're having that conversation with them. Just focus your energy on them and open up that conversation as open and honestly as possible.
Just listen to that inner voice. If it's telling you something's wrong, then don't sit with it. And, there is no shame in anything. Things do need to come out. We need to have that open honesty. And that's important, that if we really want to push ahead the mental health agenda for everybody, that's so critical. For things like starters like I've noticed you've been quiet recently. Is everything okay? Even if you're drawing a bit closer and you're using a bit more intuitive eye contact, that can really help them to open up. You can tell me anything. You know that, don't you? Is there anything on your mind? You can tell me. Yeah. We don't keep any secrets. Little things like that can make a big difference to how you gently start a conversation which is about mental health. So it's very, very important that you do this in a very delicate way. And again, listening actively, just to repeat. Sometimes as teachers, if we repeat back what the learner has said, it shows that we've been listening, and they feel more valued, and they'll divulge more in the conversation, and they may even reveal what is getting to them. So that's really important. And it's so important that, we don't judge, just listen. And sometimes, hold back and don't say anything. Maybe just nod your head and then just let it all come out. Okay. And there may be some emotions, maybe some tears, have a tissue box ready. That's absolutely fine. It's good. It's normal. And it's okay not to be okay.
Okay, Sunil, thank you for that advice, and Mital as well. Apologies, we've going to bring this particular episode to a close, but we would love to have you back for another segment on this very important topic. And I'd also like to request the viewers to please share your thoughts and views across all media platforms. If there's any specific questions that you have for our guest speakers, our teachers, Mital Thanki and Sunil Naphray. Please email info@sikhchannel.tv, and we look forward to having you back. And until then, please be open about mental health, and we will speak to you again. Thank you very much, Mithil and Sunil, for joining us. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.